They handed me the Crystal Award with one hand and slipped the termination letter into my other. That moment, bathed in stage lights and artificial applause, didn't come out of nowhere. It was choreographed, precise, and if I'd paid attention sooner, I might have seen it coming. But the thing about betrayal is, it rarely shouts. It whispers. 3 weeks earlier, I was alone in the corridor outside the executive conference room. I'd arrived 10 minutes early for a strategic planning session and decided to wait. I didn't mean to overhear anything. I didn't want to, but the door hadn't shut all the way. Inside, I recognized the voices instantly. Malcolm Reed, our silver-tongued COO, and Vivian Cross, our new head of people operations. Vivian used to be a friend, or so I thought, years ago. I'd helped her transition from a mid-level recruiter to a trusted voice in upper management. I taught her how to read a boardroom, how to lead with both facts and intuition. Now. Her voice was low, calculated. She thinks just because she closed Solvanta, she can rewrite how this company works? Malcolm's chuckle followed, sharp like broken glass. She's a brilliant implementer, but leaders, they make people feel safe. Isabella makes people nervous, Vivian added. We have a brand to protect. We can't build it around someone like her. Silence. Then, we'll give her the award. Let her have her night, and then we move forward, cleanly. I didn't breathe. I didn't blink. I just stood there, frozen outside the door like a ghost haunting her own house. At that moment, something shifted. I'd always known corporate politics were real. I just never expected them to be carved so precisely into the space behind my back, inside that room. They were cutting me out of the story I'd written. Back at my desk, I stared at the floor-to-ceiling windows of Elixis Global's 33rd floor. The city looked small from here, manageable, contained, like it could fit into my hand. I'd poured 11 years into this company. I'd watched it rise and fall and nearly drown, and when it mattered most, I'd built the platform that brought it back to life. The deal with Solvanta hadn't been luck. It was strategy, sweat, and sleepless nights, but none of that mattered. Apparently, not to them. I didn't cry. I didn't storm into that room. I sat still, and in that stillness, a quiet knowing crept in. They were going to cut me out, and if that was their plan, I needed a better one. Hope is a dangerous thing in corporate life. It doesn't shout. It hums, quietly, insistently, beneath the buzz of fluorescent lights and calendar alerts. After what I overheard outside that boardroom, I should have packed up and walked, but I didn't, because the very next day, Solvanta called. We're in, the voice on the other end said. It was Morgan Levant, their chief innovation officer. We've reviewed the proposal, $800 million over 5 years, energy analytics, infrastructure modernization, carbon offset tracking, the whole suite. My heart skipped. She continued, but there's one condition, you lead it. Isabella, personally. I froze. You mean as in, oversee the team? No. We want you. The deal's tied to your leadership. If you're not steering, we're not signing. It wasn't just a win. It was validation. Everything I'd poured into that platform, the late nights rewriting architecture, the client research, the on-site simulations, had been recognized, not by my own company, but by a global client with more leverage than any internal title ever could give me. When I relayed the news to Malcolm and Vivian in the executive update, I expected at least restrained celebration. A nod, a clap, a handshake. Instead, Malcolm just blinked slowly and said, "That's unexpected," Vivian added. "It's not typical for clients to dictate internal project management." "No," I said, my voice steady. "But this isn't a typical deal. This saves us. This rebuilds our position in the market overnight." They both looked at the folder in my hands like it might explode. I'll need full access to the project pipeline and a dedicated DevOps team. I continued. We're going to implement in phases, but the system needs to be scalable from day one. Solvanta expects quarterly deliverables, and we're not going to disappoint. Malcolm nodded faintly. We'll get legal to draft it. Congrats. But as I left the room, I could feel it again. That hum, not of hope, this time, but of something colder, quieter, like ice forming just beneath the surface. Still, I kept going. I met with Solvanta's integration leads the next morning. We aligned tech stacks, drafted implementation protocols, and mapped a timeline. Every moving part clicked into place. Every detail reinforced the same truth. I'd done it. I'd brought us back from the edge. Elixis had been weeks from gutting whole departments. Now we were talking about growth, rehiring, expansion. The internal team, especially engineering, was buzzing. Emails came in with subject lines like, "Let's build something that lasts," and, "Finally, a real project." People were energized in a way I hadn't seen in years. For a moment, I forgot the whisper behind the door. I forgot the way Vivian had avoided eye contact during my presentation. I forgot how Malcolm had skipped the last sprint review. I thought this win would change things, but some people don't celebrate your success. They see it as a threat. They don't lean in, they lean away. And in that silence, beneath the surface of hope, something was still shifting. Hope only lasts so long before instinct takes over. After 11 years in corporate innovation, you learn the signs, shifts in tone, offhand comments in meetings, being excluded from email threads you should have seen. Most people ignore them until it's too late. I don't ignore signs. So the moment Solvanta confirmed the $800 million contract, with me as their non-negotiable project lead, I stopped celebrating and started building. Not out of paranoia, out of pattern recognition. I knew Malcolm and Vivian wouldn't let it stand. I just didn't know when they'd make their move. So I made mine first. It began with an old laptop, not company-issued, not traceable. One I kept from my freelance days, stored in a climate-sealed case inside a file cabinet labeled Vendor Legal Archives. I hadn't used it in years. But when it powered on and the screen lit up, I knew I still had time. The machine was clean, no Elixis software, no IT surveillance tools. I rerouted the network through a private VPN I'd maintained on the side for years, encrypted everything through a double-layered AES key, and got to work. I wasn't cloning the platform I built for Elixis. I was reimagining it. Everything they claimed as theirs had been constructed using internal tools and processes. This version, it used only my own codebase, personal assets, and open-source libraries with clear, independent licensing. Nothing touched the Elixis ecosystem. Every late-night brainstorm I'd kept in my private Git folder, every discarded prototype, every functional diagram I wasn't allowed to submit because it was too advanced. I brought it all together in what would become the clean, proprietary foundation for my alternative system. I named it Project Aegis. In mythology, Aegis was a shield, not a sword, and that's exactly what this was. Protection, not aggression. It wasn't designed to attack Elixis. It was built to protect me from them. Aegis wasn't just a mirrored version of the analytics engine. It was smarter, faster, and hidden deep inside was something more. A silent audit system. Every file accessed, every unauthorized login attempt, every download performed by someone outside the implementation team, Aegis would log it. Time, location, username, and intent tags based on file type and behavior patterns. By the end of the first week, I had 14 entries. By the second, 47. Most of them were Vivian. At first, she only pulled progress reports. Then she started downloading raw usage data and model performance charts. Charts I hadn't sent to her. They were preparing for something. I didn't know what. But Aegis was watching. Meanwhile, I kept the Elixis version running, stable, predictable, clean, on the surface. Everything looked the same. the client dashboard, internal analytics, weekly deliverables, all smooth. But below the surface, divergence, subtle, deliberate separation, a system built not to last for them, but to pivot for me. I rewrote the user management protocol. In my version, admin rights couldn't be transferred without biometric verification. I integrated a remote deactivation trigger that could wipe Alexis's copy if tampering was detected. And I added a core logic dependency that no one would notice, until they tried to run it without me. Control isn't just holding power, it's preparing for the moment when someone tries to take it. So I kept working in silence. During meetings, I took notes. I smiled at Malcolm's fake compliments. I let Vivian offer project management suggestions she knew I'd never implement. They thought I was playing the loyal engineer, but the truth? They were walking on glass floors I had designed, and when they cracked, I would already be standing on solid ground. It happened in a room I used to own. The 10th floor strategy conference room had once been my stage. I'd paced in front of that glassboard pitching machine learning models, road mapping platform deployments, and defending budgets that didn't exist yet, but that I made real. Now, I sat in the far corner, 3 chairs down from the whiteboard, behind 2 layers of VPs who didn't know what I did, but who suddenly had plenty of opinions about it. Malcolm called it a high-level visioning session. He insisted it was about mapping Alexis's future after the Solvanta deal, said he wanted collaboration across verticals, a phrase he always used when he didn't want pushback, just polite nods. I shouldn't have been surprised when he didn't invite me to the pre-meeting dinner the night before, or when I found out there was a deck I hadn't seen until I sat down that morning. Still, I believed, stupidly, maybe, that what I had built would speak louder than my absence in the email chain. I was wrong. The meeting began with projections. Revenue up 38% quarter over quarter. Malcolm praised the whole team's effort in securing Solvanta, even though the client had named me explicitly in their contract as the reason they signed. Vivian, sitting to his right, gave a clipped smile. She hadn't looked me in the eye since the ceremony invite went out. They clicked through bullet points about system scalability, post-contract integration, and hiring targets. I waited for the slide with my framework. I waited to be asked to speak. Instead, Malcolm turned to a chart that misrepresented the rollout timeline completely. This assumes we're live by Q2, which may require an adjusted sprint schedule, he said. We'll need tighter cycles, possibly more engineering support. I raised my hand slightly. Actually, the current model already accounts for that. The load balancing layer in the architecture allows... Malcolm held up a finger. Just a sec. I froze. He turned to the man sitting 2 seats down, someone from finance who hadn't touched a line of code in his life. Jacob, your team ran those budget analyses, right? Yeah, Jacob replied. We assumed engineering would take lead on most of the technical debt. I tried again. With respect, the engineering model was built as an implementation tool, not a strategy driver. That's why Solvanta insisted on solution oversight. Vivian cut in smoothly, smiling at the group. That's true. Isabella's engineering background gives her a strong tactical grip, and we're all grateful for that. But this meeting's more about strategic vision, brand positioning, long-term leadership. Engineering background. She said it like it was a limitation, like I was the wrench in the toolbox, useful, but not suited for the boardroom, like I hadn't just architected the very thing that saved their quarterly earnings. No one blinked, no one spoke. The conversation moved on. For the rest of the hour, I didn't say a word. I sat, took notes, nodded where appropriate, but inside, something splintered. It wasn't just the words. It was the way the room shifted when I spoke, like it recoiled slightly, like my presence had become inconvenient. Not because I'd failed, but because I had succeeded too much. Success had made me a liability. After the meeting, Vivian caught up with me by the elevator, voice sweet as ever. "You know Malcolm's just trying to manage the politics around the board. Don't take it personally." I didn't answer, because the truth was, it was personal. It always had been. This wasn't about miscommunication. This was deliberate erasure, a slow, public unseating, a reminder that no matter how valuable I was to the company, I wasn't leadership material in their eyes. I had stepped out of place by being necessary. And now, they were putting me back where they thought I belonged. The glass ceiling wasn't a metaphor in that moment. It was a polished, transparent surface I could see through, watching them all maneuver above me. And the worst part? They wanted me to stay silent and grateful for the view. The office cafe used to be my safe place. It wasn't much, just a modest corner space with cracked tile and overworked baristas. But it held a certain rhythm, one I had come to rely on. My morning always started there, not because of the coffee itself, but because of who I met there almost every day at 8:20 in the morning. David Lynn. David had been my closest ally for years. We started at Elixis only weeks apart, back when the company was still lean, scrappy, and full of ideas. While I built systems, he built bridges between product, sales, and people. He understood my silences and filled them with context. I covered for him during his paternity leave. He stayed up with me on Slack when I was rewriting back-end logic from scratch the night before a deadline. We always said, no matter how bad it gets, we meet for coffee. But that morning, the seat across from me stayed empty. I'd texted him the night before, after the strategy meeting, where I'd been dismissed like a footnote in my own project. "Coffee? Need 10 minutes. Tomorrow morning at 8:20. Same place." He didn't respond. Unusual, but I understood. He had a lot on his plate. I got to the cafe early anyway. I ordered his drink, half-calf vanilla latte with almond milk. No foam. It sat on the table growing colder by the minute. At 8:40, I texted again. "Are you running late?" Nothing. At 8:50, I called, straight to voicemail, by 9:10. The drink had started to sweat through the cardboard sleeve. So had I. I stood, tossed both cups in the trash, and tried to tell myself he must have been pulled into something urgent, maybe a fire drill meeting, maybe something unavoidable, but deep down, I already knew. The text came later that day. "I'm sorry, Isabella. I just can't be seen taking sides right now. Things are shifting. You understand?" No, I didn't. Or maybe I did. And that was worse. David wasn't just choosing silence. He was choosing safety, alignment, the path of least resistance. He was choosing them, even if he couldn't say it out loud. That night, I sat in my car in the office garage long after the building had gone dark. I stared at the exit sign glowing dimly in the rearview mirror. A symbol. Maybe a message. But I didn't move. I thought about all the rooms I had helped shape, the dashboards I designed, the team structures I'd fought for, the junior hires I mentored through imposter syndrome and burnout. I thought about the Friday pizza nights I organized when no one had budget, but we needed morale. This company had been my blueprint, but now I felt like a ghost walking through a house that remembered me differently than I remembered it. Even the little things had changed. The last 3 one-on-one syncs I scheduled had been rescheduled due to bandwidth. The client-side meetings with Sylvanta had been reassigned for transparency, and the last company-wide newsletter, the one that listed internal recognitions, my name wasn't there, but Vivian's was, along with a congratulatory note for collaborative leadership during platform expansion. Collaborative, the word tasted bitter. That week, I realized I wasn't being sidelined. I was being erased, quietly, efficiently, as if someone was running a cleanup script in the background of a machine I had built. And the worst part? People I trusted were watching it happen and doing nothing. David's absence hit harder than any formal memo or policy shift. It was personal. It was proof that even the strongest connections can be severed by fear. I walked back into the office the next day and passed him in the hallway. He nodded. I nodded back. Neither of us said a word. That's when I understood. I was no longer one of them. I was on my own. And from that moment forward, I started acting like it. Betrayal doesn't always announce itself. Sometimes. It lands silently, neatly formatted and politely worded, at the bottom of your inbox. It was a Tuesday afternoon, quiet except for the faint hum of fluorescent lights and the rhythmic tapping of keys around me. I'd just wrapped up a technical walkthrough with Solvanta's data science team. Their VP had ended the call with, "We're in good hands, Isabella. Honestly, you've raised the bar for all our vendors." I smiled, muted the call, and leaned back for a breath I thought I'd earned. That's when I saw it. Subject line, Final NDA plus Transition Plan. Attachment is Marshall Offboarding 2025. D1.pdf at first. I thought it was a mistake. I hadn't submitted any resignation paperwork. I wasn't offboarding anyone. And it came to my personal inbox, not the company address. Still, curiosity nudged me. I clicked. The document opened with cold precision. It was a termination packet. Addressed to me, signed, final, stamped with a date, 4 days before the company's award ceremony, the same one where I had stood on stage, holding a trophy, smiling like I had a future here. The first line read, "Thank you for your contributions. Elixis Global has decided to move in a new direction." My pulse slowed, not quickened, slowed, like my body didn't want to believe what it was seeing. I scrolled. A standard non-disparagement clause, a handover checklist, a polite suggestion that I remain cooperative and constructive in the transition period. Severance offer, 2 months' pay. Nothing extraordinary, nothing personal, except for one thing. Drafted by Vivian Cross, reviewed and approved. Malcolm Reed. My hand tightened around the mouse. A quiet heat flushed up my neck. Vivian. She wasn't just complicit. She wrote it. I stared at her name in that footer for a long time, like I could burn it off the page just by looking. This wasn't an end-of-quarter adjustment or a legal formality. This had been planned, executed, and hidden. And while I'd been building the most important platform of my career, while I'd been saving their company, they'd already processed my exit. Worse, they'd dressed it up with an award and applause, like that would soften the blade. I walked out of my office and made my way to HR, not to confront anyone, at least not yet. I needed clarity. I needed to know if this was official or some administrative error. A voice called after me. "Isabella!" I turned. It was Kara, a junior HR associate. She looked pale, rattled. She held a folder in one hand and a clipboard in the other. "I'm so sorry," she blurted. "I was uploading the Q3 offboarding packages to the archive, and I think I emailed yours by mistake. I didn't realize it hadn't gone out officially." My heart thudded once. Quiet. Final. "So it's real." She winced. It was supposed to be confidential. Vivian asked me to keep it internal until after the rollout plan. I didn't mean to. "It's fine," I said, though nothing felt fine. "Thank you for being honest." Kara looked like she might cry, but I didn't comfort her. Not because I was angry at her, but because I couldn't afford to waste my strength on someone else's guilt. I walked slowly back to my office, closed the door, sat down, reopened the file. Every line screamed quiet betrayal, not rage, not dramatic declarations, just erasure, sealed in legal language and company tone. And they thought I'd accept it. They thought I'd smile and nod and exit gracefully while they kept the credit, while they repackaged my work, while they slid my name off every document and replaced it with someone safer. Vivian had shaken my hand the night I got the award, told me I was an inspiration to future leadership, and yet she'd signed my exit before that handshake ever happened. I didn't scream. I didn't throw anything. But a part of me went very, very still, because this wasn't just betrayal, it was strategy. And if they were going to play it like a game, then I'd play, too. Only I wouldn't be following their rules, I'd be rewriting them. I didn't call them out of anger. I called them because the numbers made sense. The morning after I read my own NDA, the world outside my window looked unchanged. Same skyline, same schedule, same polished corridor outside my office, where people still smiled and nodded as they passed, like they didn't know I'd already been cut from the cast. But something inside me had shifted. There's a kind of calm that settles over you when the war is already underway and you realize no one's coming to save you. That's when you stop pleading. You start preparing. I opened a spreadsheet, pulled up the data I'd archived, client growth trajectories, contract renewal patterns, trust metrics. The platform I'd built wasn't just a product. It was a bridge between clients and performance, between metrics and intuition, and it wasn't bound to Elixis unless I let it be. So I looked for the company that wouldn't just use what I'd built, but understand it. The name had come up once in a late-night conversation 2 years earlier, back when Elixis was on the verge of losing a mid-size clean energy client named Orvento. We let them go, said they weren't scalable enough. Malcolm called them a distraction. Orvento left. 6 months later, their CTO co-founded a boutique strategy firm in Boston. They called it Navax. At the time, no one paid attention. Too small, too quiet. Now, they were being mentioned on procurement shortlists, industry newsletters, mid-tier government contracts, the kind of firm that grew while no one was looking, and suddenly became a contender. I opened their website, clean, sharp, built on conviction. Their leadership page caught my eye. Leah Morton, former CTO of Orvento, the same woman Malcolm once referred to as a mid-level operator with an inflated ego. Apparently, her ego had built a 22-person consultancy with clients in 3 countries. I stared at her face for a moment. Familiar, distant, unexpectedly steadying. Then I clicked contact. I didn't go through their form. I bypassed the admin email and called the direct line listed at the bottom of the press section. I wasn't in the mood to wait. 3 rings. Then, Leah speaking. Her voice was exactly as I remembered, measured, professional, with an undercurrent of, "Don't waste my time." "It's Isabella Marshall," I said. A pause. "Well, that's a name I didn't expect to hear again." "I'm not calling as Elixis," I said. "I'm calling for something else. I have a framework I built, one they're using, but they won't own it for long. It's modular, clean, fully compliant, and it's yours if you're ready." "So?" Silence again. Then, "I take it things have changed." "You could say that." I said, "Let's just say I'm no longer interested in protecting people who write my termination before they finish using my work." "I heard about the Solvanta deal," she said. "Nice job." "Thank you. That system? I rebuilt it, stripped out every internal dependency. What I have now is smarter, smaller, deployable tomorrow." She didn't say no. She didn't say yes. She said, "Send me a non-binding overview and a 20-minute roadmap deck. Tomorrow noon. If it's real, I'll get my team in a room." I nodded like she could see me. "You'll have it by 10. I hung up. No adrenaline, no thrill. Just the quiet snap of a gear clicking into place. I didn't pace or punch the air. I didn't scream. Instead, I turned back to my laptop. I reopened the Aegis architecture, added new deployment protocols, adjusted load balancing specs to fit smaller teams. Then I opened a new folder, Navax Transition V1. For the rest of the day, I worked, not for Elixis, not for revenge, for the version of me who refused to be defined by who gave her a badge and who took it away. Vivian and Malcolm thought they were writing my end. They didn't realize I was already writing my next beginning. There's a reason I always wrote my own contracts. at least the first drafts. It started as a habit, a holdover from years of working as a freelancer before I joined Elixis. Back then, I learned quickly that language was currency, and fine print was armor. The people who didn't read line by line, they were the ones who got steamrolled, forgotten, replaced. So when it came time to finalize the Solvanta deal, I insisted on reviewing the full legal language myself, every clause, every sub-bullet, every footnote. Malcolm had rolled his eyes and waved it off like it was micromanaging. Vivian, who had looped in legal, said, "We'll let the lawyers handle the details." But I didn't trust their lawyers, not when my name and my work were on the line. And deep down, I already knew what they were planning. I'd read between the lines of their compliments. I'd seen the quiet nods of exclusion. They didn't see me as a leader. They saw me as a tool, useful only until the job was done. That's why I wrote Clause 17b. On the surface, it looked routine. Licensing of software and systems herein referred to as Marshall Platform shall remain conditional upon continued oversight by the architect or their designated successor, and is limited to operational deployment rights within the Solvanta Elixis contract term. It sounded boring, legal, harmless, but it wasn't. Buried in that clause was a firewall, a gate only I could open. Elixis hadn't bought my system. They'd rented it. They didn't own the underlying architecture. They were leasing access. That meant if they terminated me without honoring the deployment terms, they would lose the license, and Solvanta could walk away. Penalty-free. I'd written it in neutral, technical language. Legal had skimmed it, filed it under standard framework IP. No one blinked. Why would they? No one expected the product to become the person, and that was their mistake. They thought I was just the engineer, the builder, replaceable. But the very foundation of the deal, its structure, security, logic, ran through decisions only I could explain. That wasn't ego, it was fact, and I made sure the contract reflected that truth, even if they didn't see it. After my call with Leah from Navax, I reopened the contract and reread Clause 17b for the 100th time. It held, clean, ironclad. Not even Malcolm's manipulations or Vivian's rewrites could erase it without triggering a breach. And I knew, eventually, they'd try. I imagined the moment clearly. The boardroom scramble. The legal team digging through documents after Solvanta expressed concern. The dawning horror on Malcolm's face when someone finally pointed to the clause and realized what it meant. It would be too late by then. That's the thing about power. The real kind doesn't scream. It whispers, waits, buries itself in the lines no one reads until it's already decided everything. But power needs patience and timing. So I didn't act immediately. I didn't flaunt the clause or wave it like a banner. Instead, I filed it in a folder labeled Compliance, Shared Contracts, Reviewed. I gave them everything they needed to succeed, and just enough rope to hang themselves when they tried to take credit for what they didn't understand. Then I did one more thing. I sent an email, not to Malcolm, not to Vivian, to Morgan Levant, Solvanta's CIO. Subject line, Follow-up Re. Oversight and Continuity. Hi Morgan, as we move into implementation, just a brief note to reaffirm that deployment is proceeding under the licensing terms outlined in 17b. As discussed, continuity of architectural oversight remains integral to system stability. Please don't hesitate to reach out if legal has any questions. Warm regards. Isabella. I didn't BCC anyone. I didn't flag it as urgent. I let it sit, quiet and official. In her inbox, a time-stamped reminder of what we'd agreed to, and what Elixis was now gambling against. Within 2 hours, Morgan replied, "Thanks for the confirmation. Isabella, we're fully aligned. Please keep us informed of any shifts on your end. We're excited to move forward, especially with your continued leadership." I stared at that last sentence for a long moment. Continued leadership. They wanted me, not just the system, not just the data, and because of that clause. They had every right to walk if I wasn't involved. Vivian and Malcolm hadn't read that far. Or maybe they had, but assumed the words were ornamental, soft guardrails that could be ignored or waived later. They were wrong. What they thought was decoration was design. And while they plotted behind closed doors, while they polished speeches and planned exits, I had already laid the tripwire. Now all I had to do was wait for them to step on it. There's a strange kind of peace that settles in the hours before everything burns. Not panic, not fear. Something quieter, measured, as if your body already knows what's coming and has made its peace long before your mind catches up. That's what I felt the night before the spotlight, the calm before the engineered storm. The company was buzzing in anticipation. Tomorrow was the shareholder ceremony. Solvanta executives would be present. Malcolm had prepared a speech. Vivian was arranging photo ops. The whole thing had been labeled a celebration of innovation and partnership. They thought I didn't know what was coming, that I hadn't noticed the NDA draft, the shift in room temperature during meetings, the fading mentions of my name in internal announcements. They assumed I was still clinging to hope, too grateful, too invested to fight back. But what they didn't know was that I had already finished my last true task for Elixis 2 nights earlier. I'd spent the evening alone in my apartment, lights low, music soft, Miles Davis humming like smoke in the background, on my laptop. Lines of code shimmered in terminal windows like constellations. Project Aegis, clean, stable, final. I reviewed the architecture one last time, ran the system diagnostics, triple-checked the server reroute protocols. The mirror environment had been live for 3 weeks now, storing every update, every deployment, every line of logic I'd written under Elixis's nose. What they thought was the full system was a shell, a mirrored endpoint built to reflect back only what I allowed. And tonight, I would finish the transfer. I sat quietly and launched the terminal script. The command was simple: Aegis final sync.sh. The screen lit up with a cascading stream of green. Syncing node. 100% migrating analytics layer. Complete extracting core modules. Complete disconnecting redundant hooks. Success local instance override. Engaged. Deploying message. I was never yours. The line blinked once, then disappeared. And just like that, Elixis's system was hollow. They wouldn't know. Not yet. The shell would still function for a while, accepting queries, generating dashboards, returning pre-programmed outputs, but without the core logic modules and live feedback layer. It would rot from the inside out within days. Solvanta's data science team would notice the inconsistencies first, then legal, then the board. By the time they connected the dots, I'd be somewhere else entirely. I powered down my machine, sat back, closed my eyes. There was no triumph in the moment, no rage, just stillness, the kind you feel when you've finished something irreversible. I thought I'd feel heavier, but instead I felt light, as if I'd been carrying a weight I hadn't noticed until it was finally set down. In the quiet, I thought about what had led me here. Not just Malcolm or Vivian, not just the politics or the betrayal, but the way the system treated builders like me, people who solve problems, who innovate, who create as tools, not minds, as means to an end, never as the end itself. I had been the architect of a billion-dollar turnaround. And still, they couldn't say my name in the same breath as leadership, so now, I'd give them exactly what they wanted, a future without me. Only they didn't realize that future would arrive hollow, silent, and ready to collapse. At 11:04 in the evening, I poured a glass of wine, sat on my balcony, and looked out over the city. The skyline blinked with life. A circuit board of windows and motion. Somewhere in that city, Leah Morton was reading my integration roadmap, already lining up infrastructure. Morgan from Solvanta would soon notice the subtle delay in Alexis's system and wonder why. And in a few short days, it would all unravel, with perfect precision. The storm was already coming. And I was calm, because unlike them, I wasn't afraid of starting over. I'd done it before. I'd do it again. But this time, I wouldn't be building something for someone else. This time, the system would be mine. From the outside, it looked like triumph. The ballroom at the Hyatt downtown had been transformed for the occasion. Blue and silver banners hanging from the rafters, uplights bouncing off crystal centerpieces, glasses of champagne lining white linen tables. A sleek screen above the stage rotated through buzzwords. Innovation, vision, leadership, somewhere near the front. I could hear the MC practicing his lines over the mic. Spearheaded one of the most successful enterprise partnerships in Elixis history. And me? I stood backstage, a small wireless mic already clipped to my collar, hands clasped loosely in front of me. Expression calm, polished, like every other executive being honored tonight. But I knew better, and so did Vivian. She appeared beside me like a shadow, holding a slim ivory envelope in both hands, sealed, unmarked. Her lipstick was perfect, her smile practiced. "For after the speech," she said softly, slipping the envelope into my palm like it was nothing more than a thank you card. "We wanted to make sure you had clarity moving forward." Clarity. That word stung more than any insult she could have spoken aloud. I didn't open the envelope. I didn't need to. I knew what it was. I'd already seen the NDA days ago, accidentally leaked by Kara. I'd read every sterile line, signed by Vivian herself, dated days before this celebration was even announced. This ceremony wasn't a send-off. It was a burial, wrapped in lights and applause. "Isabella Marshall!" The announcer boomed through the sound system, voice buoyant. "The architect behind the Solvanta deal, and the driving force behind our future." Applause rose like a wave, loud and immediate. I stepped onto the stage with the envelope still tucked in my hand. Blinding lights hit my face. Cameras flashed. Executives clapped from their tables. Malcolm stood near the edge of the stage, clapping a beat too slowly, eyes unreadable. I walked to the center of the stage and took the crystal award from the MC, engraved with my name, etched beneath the words, "Excellence in Innovation." I held it up, smiled. The room roared, and inside, I boiled, because I'd already transferred the system, already rewritten the code, already rerouted the architecture to servers they didn't even know existed. Their applause wasn't for me. It was for the ghost of me, the version they thought they could keep. The MC leaned toward me, whispering, "Quick speech?" I nodded. "Thank you," I began. "Thank you for this recognition, for the opportunity to do work that matters. When we started the Solvanta negotiations, many believed it was a long shot, but we saw something bigger. We saw potential, under the surface, behind the noise." I scanned the room as I spoke, voice clear, steady. And I'm proud to say we didn't just close a deal. We built a future, one rooted in accountability, resilience, and clarity. I glanced, briefly, at Vivian. Her expression didn't flicker. I continued. "Innovation isn't just invention. It's foresight. It's knowing when to push forward and when to let go." I let the last sentence hang, then gave a subtle smile and stepped away from the mic. The applause returned, thunderous and hollow, all at once, backstage. I didn't wait for congratulations. I walked through the corridor lined with floral arrangements and corporate signage. Vivian caught up with me by the service elevator, her voice still syrupy. "You handled that beautifully." "I know," I said flatly. She looked down at the envelope still in my hand. "I trust everything's clear now." "Crystal," I replied, holding up the award in my other hand. She didn't laugh, and neither did I. In the parking garage, I sat in my car and finally opened the envelope. As expected, termination paperwork. Effective immediately. A carefully drafted narrative about restructuring and evolving business needs. It ended with a request to sign and return by Friday. I set the envelope on the passenger seat and drove in silence. That night, I placed the award on the kitchen counter. It caught the light in soft angles. Beautiful. Empty. Like everything they'd promised. I opened my laptop, logged into the Aegis interface, and checked the logs. No unauthorized access, no alerts, no issues. They still didn't know. They wouldn't. Until it was too late. They celebrated me publicly because they didn't have the courage to confront me privately. They honored me with one hand while cutting me off with the other. But I had accepted their award with a smile. I had delivered the speech they wanted. I had worn the mask to the very end. And tomorrow, they would wake up to a system that no longer belonged to them, because power doesn't always roar. Sometimes, it walks off the stage holding a trophy and leaves the trap behind. Destruction, when designed well, doesn't start with noise. It starts with a breach. That morning, I wasn't at Elixis. I was seated by a window at a cafe 5 blocks from the office. Hood up, headphones in, hands wrapped around a warm ceramic mug. On my screen was the Aegis dashboard, quietly pulsing green. Everything looked calm. And then, at 10:07 in the morning, it began. Trigger detected. Protocol echelon initialized. They'd finally tried it. The breach came from Elixis's main data server. Someone had attempted to duplicate the analytics framework, my framework, likely under pressure from investors. Someone in leadership gave the green light to bypass me entirely. They were going to copy the platform, rebrand it, and erase my footprint, but they didn't know what I'd left behind. Project Aegis wasn't just a mirror system, it was a self-protecting entity, coded with tripwires, access logs, and consequences. One specific script, labeled harmlessly as Aegis Final Sync.sh, wasn't a sync command at all. It was the detonation, the moment they ran it. Aegis activated its final protocol. Every instance of unauthorized access, every login attempt from masked credentials, every clause they'd violated from the contract, including the overlooked Clause 17b, was gathered into an encrypted report. Then, with perfect calm, Aegis sent the package to 3 destinations: SEC's Whistleblower Division, Solvanta's Legal Department, a senior tech editor at Future Ledger. No password, no warning, just truth. By 11:45, my phone vibrated. A text from a former engineering colleague. Short and shaky. Solvanta just walked. They're terminating. The board is imploding. I stared at the screen. I should have felt adrenaline, maybe triumph. But instead, I felt peace. This was never revenge. It was release. At 1:20. Solvanta posted an official statement. Due to confirmed licensing violations and integrity concerns, Solvanta is withdrawing from all current agreements with Elixis Global. The news hit markets like a hammer. By 3:30, Elixis stock had dropped 39%. By 4, internal emails began leaking, Slack threads, legal transcripts, even Malcolm's partial resignation draft. He had signed it, but he hadn't sent it yet. They thought they'd erase me. Instead, they erased themselves. In a single afternoon, the platform they tried to claim shattered beneath them, not because I sabotaged it, but because they never owned it in the first place. They just didn't bother to read the fine print. I opened the Aegis interface once more. All green, system stable. The last log read, "Execution complete. This was never yours." I closed the laptop, took a long breath, and for the first time in years, it felt like oxygen. They had underestimated me from the beginning, called me too technical, not a culture fit. Good under pressure, but not leadership material. They handed me glass trophies while sharpening the knife behind their back. So, I let them, and when they struck, I was ready. What Elixis didn't understand, what they still wouldn't, was that real power never begs for credit. It doesn't shout in meetings, it doesn't need to be liked, it just moves. Silently, strategically, and when the time is right, it detonates. When the ashes settled. What remained wasn't silence, it was clarity. 3 days after Elixis collapsed under the weight of its own deceit, the industry woke up to a different kind of headline. This time, it wasn't about lawsuits or stock crashes, it was about a new player. Navax launches breakthrough analytics platform, developed by Isabella M. There it was. My name, on the front page of Tech Pulse Weekly, across LinkedIn feeds, quoted by C-level execs who had once ghosted my emails. No more vague labels like solution architect or behind-the-scenes visionary. No more anonymity while others stood on my code. It was public, it was permanent, it was mine. Navax didn't just adopt the system, I rebuilt it from the ground up with them. In just 6 weeks, we launched the updated Aegis Core Suite under the name Athena Insight. Faster, smarter, freer. We deployed with 2 new clients in energy, 1 in logistics, and we were already in talks with a government agency. No more backroom politics, no more whisper campaigns, just honest work, bold code, and a team that believed in what we were building. They didn't ask for permission to put my name on it. They just said, "You earned this." And for the first time in my career, I agreed. Late that same day, my phone buzzed. Unknown number, voicemail only, Vivian. Her voice trembled beneath the surface, still coated with that signature polish, but now warped by desperation. Isabella, I know a lot's happened. I think we owe it to ourselves to talk. Privately, just us. There are things you don't understand. I listened to it once, then again. And then I typed a message. Simple, deliberate, honest. I taught you loyalty. You taught me war. No send button, no anger. Just saved it in my notes. A reminder of how far I'd come, because I didn't need her apology. I didn't need Malcolm's resignation either, which hit the news a week later, or the letter the Elixis board sent to employees, calling for healing and cultural renewal. That wasn't my war anymore. I had already walked away from the battlefield, and on the other side, I'd built something better. People still ask if I'm angry, if I wanted more blood. But the truth is, I didn't want destruction. I wanted dignity, ownership, recognition for the value I brought, not just in numbers, but in vision. And now? I have it. I work with people who know the difference between contribution and control, who don't fear smart women with sharper strategies, who don't see talent as a threat. And every time I onboard a new partner, I tell them what I wish someone had told me. Your name belongs on the system you build. Protect it, stand behind it, and never let anyone trade it for convenience. Elixis taught me many things. But Navax? Navax let me become who I was always meant to be. This wasn't a comeback. It was a declaration. Sometimes the strongest move you can make is walking away and building your own empire. If this story resonated with you, if you've ever been overlooked, underestimated, or erased, know that you're not alone. Drop a comment below, share your story, and don't forget to subscribe. We're building something powerful here, one truth at a time, and your voice matters.